So, good afternoon, everyone. So, I think we're about ready to start. So, first of all, thank you for signing up for Scotland's Excel Supporting Scotland's Green Recovery webinar, which we hope will certainly be inspirational and create lots of discussion amongst our community and certainly bolster all of our efforts to tackle the global climate emergency. Just a point of housekeeping, I'd just like to let everyone know that we are recording the webinar and we will be sharing it publicly. So I guess to put it in context, starting on Sunday, we will have arguably one of the most important events that's taken place for the past couple of years, the COP26 in Glasgow. And we at Scotland Excel thought it was important that we gathered industry leaders that we'll work closely with to come and discuss what efforts their organisations and their sectors have been making and what they plan to do to tackle the crisis and support the Scottish Government's ambition for a net zero Scotland by 2045. Just before we start, I'd just like to thank each of the speakers that we have today, and by way of running order, we will have Mr. Ivan McKee, the Minister for Business, Trade, Tourism and Enterprise, joining us shortly. So we will have the opportunity at the end of Mr. McKee's speech to take some questions. So I would encourage all of you, if possible, to think about some of the key areas that arise over the course of his speech and think about if there are any specific questions that you would like to table. After Mr. McKee's finished, I'll share a slide with the agenda on it. But following Mr. McKee, we're going to hear from Nikki Archer, the Deputy Director, Head of Procurement and Commercial Policy and Strategy at the Scottish Government. Then we're going to hear from Fiona Mcdonald, who's the Innovation Manager at the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. And then after Fiona, we've got Catherine Pendray, who's the Partnership Manager for the Soil Association's Food for Life Scotland programme. And the Soil Association is an organisation that we have worked closely with as part of our food framework development for a number of years. And then finally, we're going to hear from Terry Hogg, who's the team leader for Scottish Enterprises Can Do Innovation Challenge team. There will be a chance to put questions to the speakers in the panel session, which I'll host in the latter part of the session. But feel free to post any particular questions on the chat as we go through. And if we've got any gaps in between speakers, we will pick them up either at the time or following the individual presentations when we're doing the panel sessions. I guess a couple of other points of housekeeping. All attendee microphones have been muted to avoid creating an echo for others. Given the number of attendees that were present this afternoon, we request that you ensure that your cameras and microphones are turned off by yourselves if there's a glitch and they're still on. But as I said, I have plenty of time to ask questions later on. We will, as I said, we're recording the session and we will make them available, make the session available. Okay, so I think we're just about ready to begin now. And as I said in my introductory remarks, we're very grateful to Mr. McKee for coming along to join our webinar this afternoon to provide our keynote address. And I'm sure it's a very busy time for you, Mr. McKee, so thank you very much. As I said earlier, the Minister is happy to take a few questions after his speech, and there should be some time to do that, or alternatively put them in the chat. I can pick them up. But if you're ready to take over now, Mr. McKee, I'll just hand over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Sorry, I'm just making sure I've pressed all the right buttons and you can now both see and hear me. Which
yes, we can. Thank you.
I think you can. So just give me 1 second while I make sure I've got everything that I need on the screen here. Super. I think we're good to go. So yeah, thanks very much everybody for coming along, and thanks you for chairing this, and to Scotland Excel for inviting me and for putting together this great event on supporting Scotland's green recovery. And it's great to see such a good attendance. I think more than 100 when I just glanced down at the numbers there, and thanks to the panel members for joining us today for what I'm sure will be a very rich discussion. It hasn't escaped anyone, of course, that we're now just a few days away from the start of COP26 in Glasgow, and I'm very conscious of the fact that the eyes of the world are slowly turning towards us, and it's not just here we're talking about COP26 in Glasgow, but around the world people will be watching very carefully to see how those discussions transpire and what is agreed. So it's an exciting time for Scotland. It gives us an opportunity to shout about our achievements so far. And if we look at those, Scotland's emissions are down 51.5% from the 1990 baseline, just short of our very aggressive targets, but we continue to push forward on those, continue to outperform the rest of the UK as a whole in delivering those long-term emissions reductions. And of course, we're now at the point where 100%, give or take, of Scotland's electricity is generated from renewable sources. So that's something to be hugely proud of as we move forward to focus on heat and transport decarbonisation. So I suppose it's a time for us all to reflect on what we're doing, and is it enough? The COP26 conference, of course, only lasts for 2 weeks, but the fight against climate change has to continue to ramp up for us to meet those very aggressive net zero target dates that we've set ourselves. And we can use the fact that the world's coming together in Glasgow as a catalyst to galvanise around our climate agenda in Scotland, to attract new investment, to support and drive innovation and sustainable growth, and to position Scotland as a strong partner and indeed a leader in tackling global climate change. Goal number 4 of COP26 is to work together to deliver. And I think the pandemic has shown us what we can do, the boundaries we can stretch, and what we can make possible with the right motivation and a common purpose and goal. And the goal, of course, that we've set out in our programme for government is to be a net zero nation by 2045. And I think it's important just to reflect on that. When we use the word nation, we see this as a national endeavour. And that means that everybody, as citizens, as workers, as public servants, as business owners, all have our part to play. And we've all got so much also, of course, to gain. And as we move towards our net zero goal, it's imperative that we do this through a just transition. We need to achieve a fairer and greener, as well as a more prosperous Scotland. We were, of course, one of the first nations to declare the climate emergency, and we have a chance to trailblaze, to be the leaders of that green revolution. We may be a small country in global terms, but we have the power to contribute to this agenda in a very significant and big way. And as I'm sure everyone here knows, procurement is absolutely vital in ensuring that just transition. As a function, as a profession, it's got the power and the influence to move Scotland and indeed the rest of the world closer to net zero. And that just transition comes in many forms. Of course, it can mean homes that are more energy efficient and help to reduce fuel poverty. And the 1.6 billion we're investing over this Parliament to decarbonise the way we heat our homes and other buildings talks to that priority. It can mean building infrastructure and transport networks and communities that support our efforts to decarbonise, and that of course includes creating greener, more affordable and publicly owned railways, reducing car kilometres by 20% and providing free bikes for all children of school age who need them. And it can mean skills training and education that helps to secure good, high value jobs in green industries, including local manufacturing, renewables, tech, and frankly a whole other range of industries that aren't at first green related, but make a huge contribution to the fight against climate change. And it can mean job security for those industries that will play the biggest part in the transition at every level. And this also includes you, our procurement professionals. We must invest in your talents, in the procurement professionals of today and tomorrow that will deliver these schemes and these targets. By having the time, the space, the investment to deliver these outcomes, you improve the lives of people in Scotland. So I'm encouraging all organisations to recognise the power of procurement, to public sector leaders, I say, engage with your procurement teams. The challenges of today are not just for procurement to deliver, the responsibility sits on all of our shoulders. That shared responsibility can be exercised through collaboration within and beyond their own organisations. The representation and the agenda for this event shows how we can unite to achieve net zero. It demonstrates our continued collaboration on these very important issues right across Scotland. And during the pandemic, I saw how much can be achieved when we work together across organisations, working with a shared purpose and focus. And for me and for all of us, it's crucial we learn and expand upon that. For example, in response to the pandemic, we saw quickly and innovatively how councils pivoted to supply new and urgent services to the people of Scotland, providing over 9,000 devices to those that needed them most through the Connecting Scotland initiative, processing over 100,000 COVID grant applications, providing over £1 billion in support to Scottish businesses, and ensuring the most vulnerable were supported through free school meals and rapid responses in housing the homeless. Our councils reacted with unprecedented speed, agility and resilience. Together with the government, third sector and indeed their own communities, have provided invaluable support to the people of Scotland. From this, we've shown what we can achieve when we work together, both in the real outcomes we deliver for the people of Scotland and in the benefits to our climate and our economy. And right now, we've got a unique and rich opportunity to weave the economic recovery, community wealth building and environmental benefits together to be holistic in our approach and deliver climate action alongside fair work and community benefits. And I'm proud to see the public sector working together, reforming procurement and taking climate action through forums and working groups. These all show great collaboration and dedication from everyone involved. I'm excited to see what more we can achieve. And I'm also proud to see how Scottish businesses are engaging with our targets and leading the way when it comes to climate action. Just last week, we saw Scottish businesses from Shetland to Motherwell being recognised for their outstanding achievements in the Scottish Environment Business Vibes Awards. Entrants were from companies in sectors as diverse as construction, farming and fashion. It was great to see their successes being celebrated. And this shows that businesses of all sizes can be examples of good environmental practice. And to me, it shows the wealth of talent and innovation we have in Scotland across all sectors. We must harness that in order to deliver our net zero nation ambitions. And what goes hand in hand with collaboration, of course, is innovation. We don't have all the solutions to decarbonise yet. There is no one size fits all. To deliver our targets justly and sustainably, we need to innovate. The question is, how can we procure what we don't know exists? By driving a culture of innovation, by being pragmatic and flexible and bold in our contracts and our frameworks, by investing in new and emerging industries, by posing questions and not rushing immediately to answers. The Scottish Government, of course, has invested in innovation centres across a range of sectors, as well as cutting-edge initiatives like CivTech. The CivTech challenges have brought public and private sector together and achieved tangible improvements. In fact, they're now recognised as leading edge on the global stage. And it's an example of how, if we ask and we listen, we can hear different voices, different solutions, and collectively create and maximise those opportunities. So finally, I believe we are all collectively working together to achieve that common goal of delivering for Scotland, leveraging the full power of public procurement spend to support a lasting green economic recovery. And we want public procurement to deliver climate action while being good for businesses and their employees, good for society, good for places and communities, and being open and connected. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope those remarks have chimed with how you see the challenges we lie ahead. Unfortunately, I've got a very busy day in the run up to COP, as you can imagine, so I can't stay for the panel discussion due to other commitments, but I've got a bit of time now, Hugh, for any questions that yourself or anyone on the call may have.
So thanks very much, Mr. McKee. That was very insightful and very helpful to put in context what we are trying to do today. You've said a couple of things that certainly resonate with a number of people that are on the call today, and you talked about the demonstration of what can be done based on our collective response to the pandemic, which I think does demonstrate when we can go above and beyond. But you also talked about the importance of collaboration. And I guess my initial question is for you, which is, there's a general culture of collaboration across the public sector in Scotland, but what should we do differently? Should we be braver? How can we lever the degree of innovation that's taken place so that we can kind of harness that to take us forward? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is, from my perspective, from what I've seen, as I've had responsibility for procurement in government, in working with the Scottish Government team and broadly across the public sector, there is a real willingness to collaborate, and many great examples of that, right across everybody that's responsible for spending that £13 billion that we spend across the public sector procurement in Scotland. But it's a big remit. There's a lot of different parts to that, a lot of different organisations that are very big organisations in their own right. So I think there's no limit to the opportunities that we could look for to collaborate more, communicate more, share best practice more, and be proactive in that. And I think that whether that's through informal networking, through events like this, through more structured approaches, we should take every opportunity. And I would encourage everybody at all levels and organisations to be proactive in that regard, reach out, make those connections. And if you've got something you want to share, please let others know about it, and be imaginative in looking for those innovative solutions. I think is the way to go.
Thank you, Graham. We have already had a question posted for Mr. McKee.
Yes. Hi, Hugh. Do you want me to read it out, or would you like?
Yes, please.
It's a rather long one. Okay, sorry. So, Mr. McKee, we have an incredibly ambitious and ever-growing procurement agenda, and we are proud of our progress. But with tight budgets, conflicting local priorities, and a lack of local investment in both capability and capacity, frankly, we are bursting at the seams, affecting staff resilience and well-being. How can the Minister support us locally? It goes on. Give me a second. Given the criticality of procurement, is there any chance of the Scottish Government putting money in a pot to support investment in training and/or pump priming entry point positions through our Procurement People of Tomorrow programme?
Great question. I first of all just want to pay tribute to everybody that's working in procurement in all parts of the public sector. This hasn't been an easy time, and I've seen some great examples of that really up close through the work we did on PPE and other projects I've been involved in over the last 18 months. People have had to work in a different environment, out of their normal environment, to turn their hand to completely different areas, work in different ways, and I've no doubt in many cases working above and beyond in terms of the amount of hours they've been putting in. So I think that has to be recognised, and it's hugely important. I think the piece about what I would say is I think there's always opportunities in terms of collaboration to look for ways to work smarter as well as ways to work harder. I don't want people to work harder. Let's be clear about that. It's about understanding other things we can do differently and learning from best practice and collaborating and learning from what others have done to be able to make that those processes as effective as possible. And I know that everybody that's on this call and everybody beyond will be looking for those opportunities. But I think it's one area. We talk about innovation often in terms of product innovation, but in terms of process innovation and how we can be smarter at how we tackle problems and challenges is something I think we should always look to do more effectively. And I think that does help. I think the piece about training is interesting because clearly we are looking to support training in terms of transition in many sectors, and procurement, as I've said, has a key role to play there. So I think a conversation round about how we can support that, and clearly I'm not in a position to make any hard and fast commitments today, but certainly for me to have a look at that with officials and understand if there are training opportunities there that are focused on net zero challenges within the procurement space that we can look at encouraging and working alongside, then I think that would be absolutely valuable to go and do that. Okay,
thanks for that. There's another question, Mr. McKee, which is a slight variation on the same theme, and it's from Angela Taylor. And Angela talked about a major reference to the pandemic, seeing a lot of rapid response and strengthened partnerships across the public, private and third sectors. and Angela's interested in how you see that continuing, but really in terms of pace, funding and resource. And I think that that's probably in connection to public, private and third sectors working together.
Yeah, and I think it's a very similar theme that it's talking about there, that rapid response has been great to witness. And as I say, it's about getting that to become business as normal and figuring out if there's barriers and processes that we can, within staying in the very necessary rules that obviously procurement operates in day to day. But if there's ways where we can do things that allow us to be more effective and efficient there, then I think we're always looking to understand and learn from that best practice. And that partnership, not just within the public sector, which we've talked about, but also we're working with third sector and where possible with private sector to do that as effectively as possible is absolutely a direction that we want to take and encourage. And if you look at CivTech, we've talked about, but as an example, where working with private sector startup businesses in many cases, in most cases, to throw out those challenges, and then working with the businesses as they come forward with innovative solutions to those challenges is one example of that. But there are others, and I think again it's an area we'd want to encourage imaginative and innovative working in.
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm acutely aware that we've probably used up all of the time that we had, and there doesn't appear to be any other questions so at this stage. So thank you very much once again for your time and your support, Mr. McKee. I really appreciate it, but I know you've got another commitment, so we'll let you take your leave now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the session, and I think at some point, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to have these kind of events in person, and I'll actually get to meet some of the great people that are on the other side of the call here. So thanks very much, and hope everything goes well. Bye now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. So, Graham, can you please share the agenda just so that I can put it in context for the folks? So thanks, Graham. So we've just heard from Mr. McKee, which I thought was really interesting and certainly contextualises a lot of what's happening right now. As I mentioned earlier, so first of all, we're going to hear from Nikki from the Scottish Government, which we'll say a bit more about in just a second. Then Fiona from the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, Catherine from the Soil Association, and finally Terry from Scottish Enterprise. As you'll see, we've got 25 or 20 minutes left at the end for the panel discussion. So more likely we will keep any questions back and put it to individual panel members. So please, if you're posting anything in the chat and you would like the question targeted towards a specific speaker or panel member, please do that in the chat. Thank you. So just going to hand over to Nikki from the Scottish Government right now. And so, as I said earlier in my introductory remarks, Nikki is Deputy Director, Head of Procurement and Commercial Policy and Strategy at the Scottish Government. And similar to me, Nikki spent 30 years in the profession, and Nikki and I had a relatively similar background because we both came through the electronics manufacturing industry. But much of what Nikki's been involved in has been across public and private sector, leading transformation, but specialising in procurement, commercial, supply chain management and development. But I think crucially in the context of this discussion, as the head of profession for procurement, Nikki has has a specific interest in driving professional standards and developing the capability of individuals and organisations, and in particular with our procurement people of tomorrow. So welcome, Nikki. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak today, and over to you now, please.
Well, thanks, Hugh, and thank you, Scotland Excel, for having me here today. We've just heard from the Minister what COP26 means for Scotland and how procurement is viewed as vital in supporting Scotland's climate commitments. The First Minister said in her pre-COP keynote speech on Monday that Scotland must lead not by the strength of our rhetoric, but by the power of our example. And I love that. And I think it's really true at a procurement level also. So while most local authorities have declared a climate emergency, we just need to recognise, and Mr McKee inferred it, but there's a lot of decisions still to be made. There's a lot of learning still to be done, and the technology required does not exist for it all. So we need to give ourselves the permission to learn and adapt as we go. What's more critical, frankly, is that we all take personal responsibility for getting on that journey and not waiting to be asked or enabled. I co-chair the cross-sectoral climate and procurement forum that we formed in November 2019, and we're working collaboratively there to co-develop tools, guidance and a practical approach to use public procurement to support a green recovery and the wider climate and circular economy ambitions. We've got 5 work streams in addition to the main forum. The strategy and objectives group focuses on high-level messaging, policy, alignment, and trying to identify and tackle roadblocks or enablers to get traction on this agenda. The operational procurement workstream targets on-the-ground activities by buyers, focusing on how to support local action. The People and Capability Group leads on the evolution of our national sustainability procurement tools and guidance, including climate literacy for buyers, to build their confidence in driving the agenda within their organisations and with their suppliers. The Supplier and Market Engagement Group has got industry representation, and it's focused on developing clear, consistent and transparent messaging and approaches to market engagement with prioritised action based on risk and the opportunity to affect change. And finally, the monitoring and reporting team is focused on the appropriate use of life cycle and whole of life costing, as well as agreeing approaches for monitoring and reporting. And frankly, we're acutely aware of concerns on how we monitor carbon and take consistent approaches. So we're working very closely with our climate change policy colleagues to try to simplify and align our thinking and to develop further guidance to help the management information requirements, and we'll obviously roll this out to suppliers too once we're ready so they can understand expectations. But for now, what we ask is that you set out how you will use procurement to support climate commitments, the roadmaps, any targets in your corporate procurement strategies, reporting progress against those in your annual procurement reports. So clearly we're committed to mobilising our 12.6, actually it might be over 13 billion procurement spend in supporting the climate emergency, ensuring that we are doing everything we can to maximise impact through our contracts and our supply chains. And the collaborative work being done is helping to gain traction. We're seeing lots of local ownership and impact. For example, we recently shared a video case study on our non-domestic energy efficiency framework, which featured Dundee City Council and Edinburgh College, who through the framework saved money, improved their carbon footprint and the environmental comfort of the buildings within their estates. And we're working on other case studies, one on the sustainable approach that Perth and Kinross Council are taking to the Cross Tay Link Road, with some really interesting work there on embedding opportunities to reduce carbon through the life of the contract, taking a whole of life approach. And there's an increasing number of examples on carbon action and outcome elsewhere, with public bodies trialling new approaches and incorporating climate considerations in corporate decision making, for example, ICT upgrade decisions. But what I really want to do today was to focus on the future and how we might help to build the capacity and capability of buyers, organisations and supply chains to help increase our momentum in achieving climate targets and goals. So from a people perspective, where can you go for support? In March this year, we launched climate literacy e-learning on our Sustainable Tools platform, which was developed, tested and reviewed with partners in local government and elsewhere. And actually, we've mandated that learning for Scottish Government buyers. And we've made it available free of charge, like all of our tools, to public buyers across Scotland. The e-learning actually can support staff across all functions, not just procurement. So it's a really great resource to use for your whole organisation to help build awareness and open up some key conversations. In fact, during Scotland's Climate Week recently, we promoted the learning to all of our Scottish Government employees, and I know other public sector organisations are doing similarly. Now, the e-learning is just one aspect of the tools platform, which we're continuously improving and updating based on feedback. We've added videos and guidance in there to support and enable you and any users, and we're in the process of adding more case studies. We're delighted to see so many Scottish public sector bodies registered on that platform and using the tools. And it's probably worth just saying that we've got registered users from all over the UK and much further afield, including places like Australia and Canada. So if you don't know where to start and you want support, then the Sustainable Tools platform is the one-stop shop to go to as a starting point. Now, this flowchart provides a bit of an overview of where and how sustainability and the climate change objectives can be embedded in procurement processes with the tools available to support you at each stage. So at the big picture, the corporate business case and options appraisal space, before we get close to procurement or other funding streams, you might embed the BEIS methodology or whatever carbon conversion methodology you choose to help identify what good looks like and to agree the level of corporate ambition and commitment on climate. That methodology actually is currently being trialled in City Deal projects, so you might learn more about it through those. We would then promote a slightly less resource intensive set of tools, which is our sustainability tools. They use our prioritisation, identify priority focused procurements in your pipeline. So in lower paid industries or those with supply chains known to be at risk from exploitation, it promotes and enables a focus on fair work. For big carbon producing industries, the focus is clearly on climate and building more innovative, diverse and responsive supply chains. And for markets with lots of indigenous manufacturing or supply, then the focus is to be on harnessing that capability and capacity and supporting our climate challenges and ensuring they do actually have an opportunity to bid and that we're engaging with them early enough. Once you get on to commodity profiling stage, the life cycle impact mapping tool and the sustainability test supports buyers in engaging with users in the market to identify, for example, low carbon alternatives or the means to reduce carbon impact through the life of a contract, whether that's through technical innovation, choice restriction, demand management, whatever. With any guidance being detailed in buyer's guides and the monitoring of any low carbon objectives and commitments through contract and supplier management, enabling you to measure the impact against those baselines that were established at the business case stage. And as a cross-sector forum, we've also co-developed and tested our From Now to 2030 templates with local authorities and other partners. And these templates aim to help organisations plot and track their climate impact plans if they don't already have something in place, and they're hopefully useful for your procurement strategies. It's really easy to get intimidated by the level of ambition of our climate goals or to get overwhelmed by the conflicting demands, the urgency, the unfamiliar terminology. And what these tools have been created to do is to really help you prioritise and plan, to help you focus. What can you and your organisations achieve? What's proportionate to your organisation? Where's the best place to focus your attention to yield the best results? I'd also encourage you to read the update to the climate change plan, which was published, I think, in December. And that revised climate change plan highlights a roadmap of what they refer to as permissible emissions for each of the 8 key sectors included in the plan as a pathway, if you like, to the overall emissions reduction targets. It also contains a chapter on negative emissions technology, which allows us to be a little bit more transparent with our assumptions of those evolving technologies. Now, these aren't statutory targets at all. They're based on evidence, future modelling and expert input to provide a guide to the division of emission reduction effort that might be required across business sectors, helping to sort of determine the level of policy ambition in those key sectors. So these should help focus our attention in procurement to support that roadmap and aligning our From Now to 2030 templates. It's also got a very useful one-pager roadmap on the climate change plan from 2020 to 2032, if you haven't seen that already. Now, we've been listening to our heads of procurement communities' concerns that more and more is being asked of procurement. And that's why when we do develop policy toolkits or guidance, we do so in collaboration, testing our approaches with procurement and business organisations across Scotland to try to ensure that they are as buyer and business friendly as possible, and we take feedback and we adapt and we adopt and amend these things as we go. And we work with partners so that we can understand what's needed and where potential gaps exist, so that we can hear from you what's working and where you need more support. And although we do have the power to embed, good climate practice in our contracts and our frameworks, some of the biggest impacts and therefore decisions are actually made outside of procurement. And as the Minister before me, it's so important for local leaders to facilitate whole systems thinking, cross-functional whole systems thinking at an organisational level to embed and enable procurement. So it's essential that everyone starts to think about whether we buy at all, what we buy, and how much we buy, because those are all probably much more impactful than how we actually buy. So we've got an opportunity and an imperative to help influence and challenge corporate decisions, but we need commitment, understanding and engagement across organisations to do the right things. So at an organisational level, ministers have already written out to all chief officers earlier this year with a call to action to help join the dots locally. And directors of our centres of expertise and members of the Climate Forum have been engaging with local leaders to help land the messaging. You can help make those connections. If you haven't already seen that letter, we can get it sent back round to all heads of procurement as well. We've also been running myth-busting sessions for non-procurers to help identify the reality of what can be delivered through procurement, to help avoid the perceptions of the procurement rules as a blocker. So we're hopeful that these actions taken together will support buyers in engaging with their non-procurement colleagues to facilitate joined-up approaches. And in order to further support the procurement community and that organisational setup, we're currently updating the Procurement and Commercial Improvement Programme tool to embed what good looks like in terms of supporting climate aspirations. So that's another great place to look to build local understanding. And there'll be more of that coming your way as soon as we're ready to get that shared and it's through the board. But this is not about adding climate to a long list of things buyers have to think about. It's about embedding climate considerations in everything we do. So within the climate change plan, the approach to the green recovery has been framed around 5 key themes. And the link to procurement's role in supporting these is hopefully clear. But it certainly requires joined up local engagement to drive demand and take action to support the net zero economy, and to take individual and collective accountability as an organisation for positive behavioural change. And as I said, although we've got the support and tools available, we'll continue to develop more. When it comes to climate, we have to admit we don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But we've come so far, and who'd have thought robots would be used to install insulation in Scottish homes? So, innovation's coming. We need to help and enable it. But for me, how we build for the future is about how we nourish our talent, we encourage the creative thinking, we take pragmatic approaches to procurement. And one option is to grow our own talent. And there's so many engaged and passionate modern apprentices, undergrads, graduates with sustainability high on their agenda. And we should be aiming to harness that passion through the Procurement People of Tomorrow programme, positioning procurement as a great career to develop green skills and to fight the climate change. And I can honestly say that from my own experience in Scottish procurement and Scottish government, we've recently hired 6 impassioned graduates who are already making their mark on the sustainability agenda. And as we build our own capacity and capability, the only thing I would say is it's obviously essential that we consider the capability and capacity of our suppliers too. So we need to be thinking about place-based approaches, building resilient supply chains, in particular working closely with our economic development and enterprise colleagues to not only embed climate in our wider community wealth building aspirations as part of a green recovery, but also to assess our future investment pipelines, thinking now about where we'll require and can enable new solutions, innovation or skills to reach our climate goals and support that future capability and capacity of our supply chains. And that all of that is enshrined in our just transition policy. So for procurers, there's a space in your community benefits to enable skills and training for green jobs, as well as those environmental benefits, enabling innovation and asking and enabling economic development. There's also an opportunity to influence good jobs, so good green jobs, through the promotion of Fair Work First, including the real living wage. And of course, we need to ensure that our approach is relevant and proportionate to ensure our SMEs and third sector procurement, third sector suppliers have got plenty of opportunity to engage and support our supply chains. So we're working with the Supplier Development Programme to roll out our climate literacy e-learning to suppliers, and other tools, including the supplier journey, will be updated to reflect what we expect from suppliers in terms of climate considerations. So I've got an ask of you all. What are you going to do after today? After you've heard from all of us in the panel, what's next for you? And from my perspective, I'd like to keep the conversation open. And if you want any information on anything I've covered today, please get in touch at Scottish Procurement, all one word, at gov.scot. We're here to help and we're here to listen. We're always on the lookout for best practice. We want to share successes and innovation. So if you've something you want to shout about, or our communications team can help you to create video case studies, we're in this fight together. We can learn from each other and lead by example. So thank you, Hugh. That's all I wanted to say. I hope I've not taken up too much time.
No, you're almost spot on, Nikki. Thank you. I think a number of key points there, which I look forward to discussing a bit further in the panel session. But again, it's a reiteration of the importance of having a bit of joined up thinking and an emphasis on collaboration. So thank you. But we'll pick that up later. So next up, we're going to hear from Fiona Mcdonald, who's the Innovation Manager at the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, as I said earlier. So Fiona's got well experience within the construction industry, over 17 years, particularly with a focus in innovation. But Fiona's also delivered marketing, project management and client development roles at a strategic level. So therefore, Fiona's well placed to demonstrate her experience at first hand, the challenges of the built environment and the importance of bridging the gap between private and public sectors. So without any further ado, I'm just going to hand over to you, please, Fiona.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to share a presentation which will hopefully help set the scene and some of the innovation practice that we are delivering in partnership with public and private sectors across the built environment in Scotland. Bear with me one moment. So as I said, I just wanted to set the scene and I hope everyone can see that there's no technical difficulties there. And I was glad to hear that Mr. McKee noted innovation as the way forward, as naturally we are of the same belief. So just to set the scene, some of you may have engaged with us previously and this may be new territory for other participants within today's event. But Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, who are we and what do we do? So essentially, we're placed as a beacon of innovation within the built environment. As we see the shift that has to take place within our sector to become more sustainable and relevant to society's changing needs, but all with a view to create the best economic impact for Scotland. We use this quotation quite regularly because we sincerely believe it's the absolute truth. This innovate or die phrase that you might have heard before, very much so clear messaging from within the construction industry, set out in the 2016 Farmers Review. We are at 2021, but ultimately we do see ourselves still as being the last in the ranking of sectors for modernisation and advancement compared to other industries. And that is why we are all here today, and it's why the Innovation Centre programme exists, particularly with our representation within construction, the built environment. So as noted, we do see innovation as the change that unlocks new value. And as I noted, we are also part of a larger Innovation Centre programme. We are the only Innovation Centre that specifically develops new products, ideas, processes and so forth within the built environment context, but we do cross paths with some of our sister organisations that you'll see on the top half of this slide, namely Census in relation to sensor technology development, Data Lab in terms of big data, and on occasion sometimes industrial biological. In terms of our core partners and how we have been created, we are partially funded by a number of parties. Those parties include Scottish Government, Scottish Funding Council, Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And just taking those dynamics into consideration, that is how we are placed right in the heart of the activity, but joining the links between public sector, industry and academia for maximum output. In terms of some of the highlights, I won't go through these stats. I just wanted to represent some of the activity that we've delivered within the last 7 years of our existence. As you can see, quite a number of projects sitting at 355. But for us, the return on investment when it comes to funding innovation project is very much so the economic impact of new jobs, cost savings and new streams of work, job safeguarded and so forth. And there's a bit of a shift change going on just now, so we can focus these outputs and make them more in line with the net zero carbon agenda. And that is leading me on to the next area of this presentation, very much so the shift that CSIC is going through at the moment and making sure that our activities are absolutely underpinned by net zero carbon through all streams of activity. Again, to quote a great sustainable influencer, I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire, because it is. Now that's completely relevant to everything that we believe is going on a global level, never mind a built environment Scottish level. When we look at a UK capacity and our contribution to what is this, the kind of carbon crisis at the moment, 60% of UK materials used in construction, there's accountability there, and 47% the construction industry generates 47% of the UK carbon emissions. 80% of those are from buildings in action. So we can see that there's not only action to be taken, and innovation can help that, but that action has to be taken not just to how we build, but how we run our buildings. So we have a big job to do to help focus our efforts. We have 4 streams of core activity, as noted, all underpinned by the net zero carbon built environment agenda: digital transformation, advanced manufacturing, building sustainably, and culture change. Our streams of support that we offer as services to make these happen, very much so around our connected ecosystem, part of our activity here today, using our network that we've been building and establishing for the last 7 years to really support and leverage expertise, influence and support, funding support where we can. Collaborative projects relates to our own funding. We do have funding available for innovation projects to buy out academic expertise, and that's where we can lever our fantastic wealth of academic representation in Scotland to support our industry, moving it up in the ranking in terms of technology adoption and progression. Our innovation factory, we have a significant sized facility out in Blantyre, which is where I'm actually based today, which unlocks accessibility to some of the key industrial components that a lot of our industry representatives just cannot access otherwise. And our future skills programmes, which really supports the culture change through a progression of skills delivery. So this culture change that I've noted, really what we're trying to support here is the development of a diversified workforce, the creation of new skills to meet new ways of doing things, the promotion of a different built environment as an exciting place to work with new opportunities, because for us to change, we need new skills, new backgrounds and new contexts levered into our industry to make it an industry of choice, but with more diversity and representation, and that is very much so part of the agenda. Our innovation factory, just to give you a sense of presence there, it's been noted as one of the UK construction industry's first dedicated digital manufacturing, prototyping and future skills centre of excellence. So when we talk about sustainability and we talk about the greener way of doing things in a built environment context, what we don't often talk about is the skills gap that presents, and that's partially what we're part of the shift change that we're delivering just now as well. Some examples of our work, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words. I'm hoping a video says a whole lot more. So there will be a couple of videos just within some of our experience here. But just to touch on a couple of things that I think you might be interested in, our Near Homes project, which is a new platform approach to retrofitting existing building assets using locally sourced, homegrown and sustainable materials, driven by a 20-minute community concept detailed in the programme for government. So understanding that kind of transition we're in between home working and office working, reducing travel and the carbon footprint, but also this homegrown, locally sourced material option too. So I'm just going to play this video. Any joy?
Yeah.
Thank you. almost think that's quite an impressive video. Just moving on to the skills side of things, off-site ready. So there is this massive shift change happening within our industry to build in-factory conditions for more control, less waste, less time, just maximum efficiency when it comes to house building and the standardisation approach that we're attempting to adopt for scale. So this is very much so a delivery project that we delivered in partnership with City of Glasgow and a number of other project partners noted there on the slide to train the trainer. So at grassroots level, how do we get this skill set out there at a high level to let it grow its own ecosystem and promoting best practice and teaching off-site manufacturing skills? Passive House in Practice. This is a virtual and face-to-face training programme that CSIC is delivering currently. So if this is of interest to you, please do register. And the aim is to upskill 600 individuals in the application of Passive House, which has never been more relevant in terms of how we build buildings, particularly in a residential capacity. I'll just play here again. Hopefully we're lucky with the sound. And moving on to how we stay relevant, we have created a network called Built Environment Changemakers, which is a forum of aspiring leaders in the built environment to shape the work of CSIC. So what we need is experts in terms of signing off panels, understanding if innovation truly is innovation. And I liked some of the phrases that that Nikki Archer noted previously in terms of embedding what good looks like. You know, we need to understand what good looks like out with our own community, out with our own national activity, and we have this forum set up to help us to maintain that position for future projects. We also deliver a Built Environment Innovation Masters Fund, which is 20 funded master programmes for innovative research and study relevant to built environment. And this is what I referenced previously in terms of understanding that we need different expertise from different skills and different pools, and we want to bring them into this built environment to help this shift change and move us forward. Just a quick video here. the final project I just wanted to note was the Inclusive Value Toolkit, which is very much so part of this culture change, acknowledging the traditional kind of position the industry, the construction industries had previously, and supporting a movement towards a digital workplace inclusivity tracker, free to use by employers to create a more inclusive, flexible working environment and make a career in construction attractive to anyone, because we are trying to attract the best people to help move us forward. Sorry, this final part is the Make It Smart Hub. So realising that there are the kind of rural challenges and benefits within our Scotland geography. So an innovation one-stop shop for construction and manufacturing in the Highlands and Islands was set up, and that was in partnership with Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Scottish Government. And ultimately, I'd just like to finish by saying a lot of these green solutions and green innovation projects, you know, they might seem quite futuristic, but I just wanted to offer the reassurance that they are happening now. They're happening at CSIC and beyond. And if you're interested in taking part, please do reach out to us to see how we can support you in your own journey.
Thank you, Fiona. Lots of interesting points made, and certainly there's an echo with what both Mr. McKee said and what Nikki said earlier about innovation and how we integrate that with our work plans going forward. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll pick up some of that in the panel discussion later. So thank you. Thank you. So next up, we've got Catherine Pendry. So Catherine, as I said earlier, is a partnership manager with the Soil Association, particularly on the Food for Life programme, which is one that's close to our heart with Scotland Excel. So Catherine's been with the Soil Association for about 4 years, with her role focusing on promoting the Food for Life certification to local authority stakeholders. So lots of crossover with our audience as well. So I'm sure there'll be a high degree of interest, Catherine. So I'm just going to hand over to you now, please.
Great, thank you, Hugh, and good afternoon, everyone. Just bear with me 2 seconds while I share the correct screen with you all. Okay, so hopefully you can now all see my slides.
Yeah, we can.
Perfect, thank you. So yes, as Hugh said, I work for the Soil Association. So thank you very much for having me today. It's been really nice to hear the other speakers and hear some slightly different perspectives on public procurement. It's been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Soil Association, I'll just start with a brief intro to that, so you kind of understand my perspective on public procurement. We're a UK-wide food and farming charity, and we work to transform the way that we eat, farm, and care for the natural world. We work across the supply chain from farm to fork to try to deliver real change to climate, nature, and health through our food system. And as Hugh was saying, I work very specifically on a Scottish Government-funded programme called Food for Life Scotland, which works closely with public procurement to deliver on these outcomes. And I'll be speaking quite a bit about that during the presentation. But I'd like to use some of my time today to talk generally about the importance of public food procurement and to talk about how we can work together to use public food to build this green recovery and tackle some of the really big issues that we're facing today. So why is food so important? Well, simply put, food and the systems that we use to produce food really are at the heart of everything. And small changes in our food system can have a really huge influence on a range of societal issues, and in particular, climate change. So in 2019, the Lancet Commission published a really influential report which described the parallel global epidemics of obesity, biodiversity loss, and crucially, climate change as a global syndemic. And that phrase syndemic was shorthand for a synergy of epidemics. So this was the idea that these phenomena were inextricably linked. They were all the result of the same food system. So we can't tackle climate change without tackling all of these issues. And the report argued that to solve all these problems, we need to think holistically about our food system. And that's a perspective that we share at the Soil Association and informs everything that we do. So just to speak very briefly about some of the issues that we have in our food system at the moment. I'm sure a lot of this will be quite familiar, but the FAO says that at least 30% of global emissions are attributable to food and our food system. So industrialized agriculture, use of synthetic fertilizers, overconsumption of meat, refrigeration, transportation. These are all adding to the warming of our climate. However, the issues that the food system faces are so much broader than just climate. So 30% of children in Scotland are overweight or obese, and statistically those children are likely to remain overweight into adulthood and suffer poorer health outcomes throughout their lives, which is really sad. By adulthood, 66% of people in Scotland are overweight. At the same time, the prevalence of both children and adults living in food poverty, unable to access a healthy, balanced diet, despite living in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, is far too high. Way too much processed food. In the UK, almost 50% of our diets are composed of ultra-processed products, which is incredibly damaging to both planetary and human health. And all too often, the economic benefit of this food system is channeled into large multinational companies, and small and medium-sized Scottish businesses and producers miss out. So food is at the root of so many of our societal problems. It's also the answer to these issues. So as Scotland's thinking about its green recovery, we need to think seriously about how we maximise the opportunities that food offers to support our policy goals. And in particular, public food is particularly important. So at the Soil Association, we believe that the public sector, through public procurement, needs to really lead the way on serving good food. The public sector feeds some of the most vulnerable in our society: children, the elderly, people in hospital. Nearly everyone will eat a public sector meal at some point in their lives. And I'm sure most of you know somebody who's eating one regularly at the moment. Maybe a child in school, a parent in a care home, a friend or family member in hospital. I'm also sure you're all very familiar with the enormous volume of spend that public procurement generates. Scotland Excel's food frameworks alone are worth over £80 million annually. So it's through this unique position in Scottish society and its very significant buying power that the Scottish public sector has this huge opportunity to shape our relationship with food from a very early age, but also to influence production and supply through that lever of public procurement. Prioritising the procurement of good food, so by that I mean food that's good for health, good for the environment, and good for our local economies, we can solve some of the problems I started by talking about. Public procurement provides a reliable route to market for sustainable producers. If we invest every penny of public money into food that's produced ethically and locally and with care for the natural world, we can go a long way to reducing the footprint of our food system. There are already some really great examples of best practice when it comes to procurement of good food, both globally and here in Scotland. I'll just briefly mention a couple of examples that our programme have been involved in. Many of you will probably have read the really exciting news about East Ayrshire Council recently awarding their milk contract to a local farm, Mossgiel. They're providing local, organic and plastic-free milk to the schools, massively reducing the environmental impact of their school meal. Another example that we worked on a couple of years ago, we worked closely with West Lothian Council to dramatically increase the percentage of the meat that was on their menus that was sourced from within Scotland. So they moved from a relatively low base to 95% of fresh butcher meat and 88% of all of the meat served in their primary schools being sourced from within Scotland, all through the Scotland Excel food frameworks. So I'm sure everyone in this room can probably think of a few exciting examples of great stuff that's already happening in public procurement around sustainable food. But I would argue that the problems that we face in terms of climate, nature and health are so significant that we need to accelerate and build on this work. And I think that's where collaboration between local government and the third sector can really play an important role. This is where I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about the work of my organisation, the Soil Association, and the Food for Life Scotland programme. So Food for Life Scotland, as I mentioned, is a Scottish government funded programme. We work to make good food the easy choice for everyone, and we believe that good food is food that's not just good for health, but also good for the environment and good for our economies. We work closely with procurement teams and caterers to support councils to achieve our certification scheme, Food for Life Served Here. This award is available in a range of public sector settings, from hospitals to care homes. And if anyone would like to chat about that more later, I'd be happy to speak to them about that after the event. But in Scotland, our team are currently fully funded to offer very comprehensive support to local authority education settings. So our focus is very much on school meals. And with the expansion of universal free school meal provision that we've seen beginning last year and continuing over this school year, this sector offers enormous opportunity for positive change. So Food for Life Served Here is a 3-tiered certification scheme that is independently inspected. We reward caterers who are serving good food. It's based on the concept of a sustainable diet, and it's aimed at allowing caterers to take step changes through that tiered approach. So bronze focuses on freshly prepared food, cooked from scratch using seasonal and unprocessed ingredients, higher welfare meat, free-range eggs, and fish not from the fish to avoid list. The silver and gold level of the award goes slightly further in terms of rewarding more local food, even higher welfare products, and higher environmental standards. So for example, at silver and gold, we reward organic spend, which, as we're speaking today ahead of COP26, is perhaps particularly significant. If we're truly to have a sustainable food system, organic definitely needs to be part of that conversation. So this map that's on the screen at the moment illustrates how Food for Life Scotland are working at the moment. We certify at some level of our award scheme 17 of the 32 Scottish local authorities. And you'll see from the screen that most of those are currently at the bronze level for the primary schools, but we do certify a few at silver and gold, and some local authorities also have their secondary schools. So whilst this is a great position to be in, and we're delighted to be working with the local authorities that we are, we really feel that we need to go much further if we're to realise our ambition to build this green recovery. We'd like to see all 32 local authorities working with us if we can, and we'd also like to be doing a lot more to support our existing award holders to continue that journey on to silver and gold. And we know that the Food for Life approach is one that works. Independent evaluation has shown a £4.41 social return of investment for every £1 invested in the Food for Life approach. The programme is essentially an example of community wealth building in practice. What's more, our standards go a long way in terms of dramatically reducing the amount of highly processed foods that children are eating, but also normalising the idea of eating seasonally and locally, something which we believe is going to be crucial if we're to transition towards sustainable diets as a society. And also the Silver and Gold Awards are supporting sustainable farming, which is really important. So as the theme of this webinar is around collaboration and partnership and how we can work together on procurement, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the support that we offer to local authorities who want to be involved in the Food for Life approach. Our programme has been designed to ensure that we can support our local authority partners in the most effective way possible. We know that resources and budgets are incredibly tight, so we've designed our team of 10 to work with local authorities in different ways to support them to source as much local and sustainable food through public procurement. So I'll just run through a few of the different roles and how we work with our public sector partners. So we have 2 officers whose roles are designed to support caterers and their procurement colleagues on recipes and menus. They work to support local authorities to design menus which are Food for Life compliant and as sustainable as possible. They can make suggestions on cost savings, how to ensure recipes maximise the use of ingredients which are seasonally and locally available, and how to use less but better quality meat, something that's particularly relevant in the school meals sector right now, as we've recently had new nutritional regulations come in, which reduce the amount of meat that you can serve. So we also have a data officer who is able to offer in-depth data analysis of supplier management information. This allows us to make data-driven suggestions and give advice based on hard facts. We use this information to build an in-depth picture of spend patterns and make recommendations based on that. We can identify opportunities to source more local and seasonal produce, and we can baseline Scottish spend. This level of in-depth analysis is not something our local authority partners necessarily always have capacity to do in-house, but it's something that we have a lot of expertise in, and it's incredibly valuable, particularly when we're trying to drive improvement within incredibly tight budgets. I've put on the slide there just a couple of examples of the sort of suggestions we might make to a local authority. So for one local authority, we identified that they could make a saving of 21%, switching from cooked to raw chicken, and another local authority could save 68% for preparing their coleslaw from scratch. And we'll usually take account of any labour implication that would entail as well, so that local authorities can make an informed decision about that. But the scale at which local authorities are buying these products, just a few of those sorts of savings can really add up to quite substantial figures. And then that money can be used to be reinvested into more sustainable products. And finally, we also have a supply chain officer whose role is to work with local authorities, producers, Scottish suppliers to help facilitate Scottish and hyper-local sourcing. So she can help set up supply chain projects, offer support on how to increase Scottish spend. For example, she worked on supporting both of the examples of best practice in East Ayrshire and West Lothian that I mentioned at the beginning. And she also works closely with Scotland Excel, as we're all working with the same goal of getting more Scottish produce onto public plates. So working together on public food has never been more important in terms of trying to stop this irreversible damage to our planet. I spoke about all the problems at the beginning that we could save through public food, but on a very practical level here in Scotland, our support is also very relevant to the policy context in which we're operating. Many of you have seen earlier this month, we finally had the publication of the long-awaited Good Food Nation bill. The bill is still stage 1, so there's a little way to go before that becomes formally law. But unless anything radically changes, we have a very good idea now of what that act will entail. And for the first time, there will be a statutory duty on the Scottish Government and other public bodies to create Good Food Nation plans and have regard to those plans when they carry out their business. So these plans must seek to address issues relating to social and economic well-being, the environment, health, and the economy. And given the enormous opportunity that public procurement presents, it's likely that food procurement will be at the heart of many of these plans. Food for Life Served Here offers an existing framework for local authorities to work within and deliver that sustainable procurement. So we would love to be involved in supporting local authorities to both write these plans and, crucially, to successfully deliver on the outcomes. I'll wrap it up there for now, but I'll finish by saying there's an open invitation for anyone who'd like to get in touch and discuss whether we can work together on Food for Life, whether that be in schools or other public sector settings. My email address is on the screen there, and I'll just stop sharing just now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Sorry, I had just a bit of trouble unmuting there, so thank you. Again, really interesting. And I think, to put it in context, Scottish local government remains one of the highest buyers of food in the country. So across our frameworks alone, that represents somewhere between 60 and 65 million pounds per annum. So therefore, our ability to influence and help to embed policy going forward that opportunity has never been greater. So thank you, and I'm sure we'll pick up more of that in the panel discussion later. So thank you, Catherine. Final speaker before we move on to the panel is Terry Hogg, as I mentioned earlier. So Terry heads up the Scottish Enterprises Can Do Innovation Challenge. A background, Terry's got over 25 years experience in innovation and new technology development, both in the private and the public sector. And Terry's team develop national support programs which utilise the demand for improved service and policy delivery from the public sector to stimulate and support innovation and economic development. So Terry, welcome. Thank you once again for coming to speak. So over to you, please.
Problem here, it's my pleasure. So good afternoon, everyone, and bear with me. I'm going to try and share my screen, and I'll ask you, Hugh, once you can see the slides, if you can.
Yeah, I can see them.
Okay. Great. So yeah, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the activities we're involved in to support the green recovery. There's obviously a whole host of things that Scottish Enterprise and the agencies are involved in. I'm going to focus in on specifically the work we're doing with the public sector and utilising and benefiting from the procurement mechanism and colleagues to do that. I'm going to take you through what we're doing with a Can Do Innovation Challenge Fund, which we've been running for a few years now, and that's directly supporting the public sector to address service delivery, policy delivery challenges by collaborating with industry. The Can Do, just for folks' knowledge, it's a Scottish Government initiative that basically brings together public, private and third sector organisations in Scotland. So a Team Scotland approach to supporting innovation and entrepreneurship. So it's led by Scottish Enterprise, this work, but everything we're doing has very much got that Team Scotland national agenda. And I'll touch on that and actually show how we're taking the learning from that approach and focusing it in on national programmes. And I'll end by just sort of highlighting and discussing a little bit of approach to a mission-based approach, where we think that is basically what's needed to realise the scale of carbon reduction impact and green economy that people are looking for. So just to start on the procurement of innovation approach we've been adopting, this is fairly new for the enterprise agencies, and some of the procurement colleagues around the audience and on the call today will be familiar. A lot won't though, so I thought we'd just touch on this because it is a little bit different. So traditionally and currently, the vast majority of innovation support to companies is given on a grant basis and a supply basis. And what I mean by that is that companies approach enterprise agencies like ourselves with great ideas. We'll look at those ideas and we'll typically give them grant support and help them to move from an idea through the development cycle and into the market. And typically the amount of funding support drops off the closer you get to the market, and you maybe get as far as prototype development. And one of the biggest barriers to innovation, in fact the biggest barrier to innovation in my opinion, is getting that first customer who wants to be the trial customer. Procurement of innovation approach flips that on its head, starts with that innovation challenge and a receptive customer, and pulls in the innovation through the process. The example you've got here, we probably in all the work we've mostly used what's called the pre-commercial procurement method. And the difference in terms of normal procurement is it's a competitive and phased procurement process. So rather than specifying your requirement, going to the marketplace, evaluating proposals and selecting a single supplier. In this example, what's happened is you've went out, we've worked with the public sector challenge, we've defined the functional requirement, we've went to the market, and actually here you can see 4 of the best proposals have been funded to develop their concepts. Effectively, you've got a competition going on here, and you've stopped that after the concept development stage. You've then selected the best 3 in this instance and funded all 3 to go through prototype development, and again assessed those outcomes, and then selected the best 2 to go through into a trial and a demonstration. Now, the benefits to the public sector in that approach is it allows you to explore a wider solution space. It also allows you to de-risk the exercise. At each stage, you're only taking the best solution forward, and in fact, you may well stop it at an early stage if you feel that the market's not quite right and they're not able to meet your requirements. It's also, rather than taking and shoehorning a sort of suboptimal solution from the marketplace, it allows you to tune and customise, by that co-development, customise a solution to your needs, and from that improve service quality, service efficiency. So lots of benefits for the the public sector. From our point of view as well, from the private sector, it's really attractive. It gives that clear signal of customer requirement, market opportunity. It gives that first trial to de-risk and provide a reference point, and that I couldn't underestimate the importance of that first trial set. It gives a company that opportunity, and by being procurement, it's 100% funding if they win the contract. And the nature of these pre-commercial procurement contracts is the supplier keeps the right to exploit the IP out with your initial purchase. And the pre-commercial procurement does stop, and there's a separate procurement exercise, but obviously the companies that have proven themselves to meet your requirement are well placed to secure that. And just for completeness, of late we've been working with some folks on some innovation partnership processes. Just effectively what that's doing is marrying up the pre-commercial procurement R&D phase with a procurement contract. Really interesting, but probably more suited towards technologies that are further down the development pathway. So in terms of our support, there's sort of three key elements to it. We provide funding. As I say, we've been directly funding the public sector to collaborate with industry, and that's really important. Innovation, most solutions will fail. That's just a fact of innovation. So that's a little bit unusual in procurement exercise. So and there's good evidence base across Europe, across the world actually, for governments supporting this agenda, particularly in the early stages. So that's been the basis of our pilot fund. Process knowledge and capability development is really important. This is quite new to most folks, so we've benefited enormously from Innovate UK government and their Small Business Research Initiative, which is basically them encoding in guidance and standard template contracts, pre-commercial procurement guidance, which has been great to get folks over the edge at the start of the process. We've obviously had their own team supporting companies, and we've benefited enormously from colleagues. I'm sure, in fact, I know that some of the colleagues are on the call just now, but the Scottish Government's got a procurement of innovation leadership group, so there's a group of folks, and I'd encourage folks, if they're interested, to reach out to myself or others to get involved in that. We've also worked very closely with and the Minister name-checked them as well, CivTech colleagues at Scottish Government Digital Directorate, who have a form of pre-commercial procurement linked into an early stage business accelerator and a location in Edinburgh, and we've put a number of challenges through that, as I've described. And we've also invested quite heavily ourselves in capability development. We've taken some of Scotland's largest public and private organisations through a 2-year structured investment and skills programme to understand what open innovation is, develop culture, processes, and develop capability to be able to do this. So that's really important, particularly if we're looking to build capacity and scale and impart this knowledge in the public sector, where folks have capacity and interest to do it. What we can provide as well is, obviously, we're tapped into a lot of networks through ourselves, our Business Gateway, our Highlands and Islands colleagues, our South of Scotland colleagues, so we can cast the net much wider than you probably would do through your normal procurement exercises, and actually get access to folks who maybe are out with your sector, but been able to give a sort of fresh perspective on your challenge. So pilot project's been very successful. We have demonstrated that the demand from the public sector vastly outstripped what we had funding to support. In terms of the companies, by a country mile, the most popular innovation challenge type intervention that we've put forward. You've got a first customer, 100% contract funded, and keep the IP, what's not to like. And even at this early stage, most of the projects are at prototype development demonstration phase. We're already seeing good evidence of impacts, and you can see the impacts there in terms of the savings and jobs. Really heartening for me, though, we've also seen already at this early stage that capability development, organisations grasping this and investing in this themselves, in particular NHS Scotland, started on our open innovation cohort, engaged in a few pilot projects, and over the last few years have significantly invested. There's now a whole host of folks operating at a national level, at a trust level, and at a regional level, embracing open innovation. Not to say it couldn't be improved, but as I say, it's a real step forward, an order of magnitude in terms of the investment and resources. I've got colleagues at Glasgow City Council, again, participated in a lot of that early programme and have embraced it strategically. Open innovation, I have a civic innovation centre set up. They've done a lot of work to engage directly with the citizens and improving their ability to design inclusive design services and look at things like design thinking, design methodology, and the processes. and colleagues at Forest and Land Scotland have benefited from some funding from ourselves, run through a couple of CivTech processes and small business research as well, and they've invested in dedicated innovation capability as well. And that I can stress that point more in terms of if we're going to crack this, we've got to build that capability in the wider public sector. So there's all the folks who engaged, you know, the great good of the Scottish public sector. All of them have one thing in common, though. They all had challenges that, when solved, impact the public purse and public services in a positive and impactful way, and all provided opportunities for companies that were markets in their own right in Scotland, but also stepping stones to international markets. I'm just going to very briefly touch on a few examples just to bring it to life, I suppose. So our first example, we've worked closely with Forest and Land Scotland. Their challenge is, how do you plant more trees for less? And there's actually two specific challenges and projects within this. The first one, I don't know if you can just see it on the left-hand side of the image, is a little critter called a pine weevil who's got a voracious appetite for young saplings, and that's obviously quite a bad thing if you're trying to grow trees, and really difficult to get a handle on where they are, you know, where they're migrating, how to direct, control, and actually it's pesticides, quite nasty chemicals that's used, are costly and they're bad for the environment. So that's a real problem that we look to solve. And that challenge was run through an SPRI, pre-commercial procurement process. And on the right, the image there is representing the process from going from seed to sapling and planting trees. And actually, incredibly, that process loses 2/3 of the seeds through that process. It's really inefficient. And the seeds actually take about 20 years or trees take about 20 years to get to the point where they can produce the viable seeds. So it's a really finite resource. So big challenges, and we ran that one through our CivTech colleagues, so both of which were successful. The first one, we've got a company, Omatech, who've developed a really nifty trapping technology which sits out in the trees and the forests and uses chemicals to attract the pine weevil into it, and uses novel imaging technology and communication technology to understand where they are and direct interventions, and it's got a not so savoury biological control. So not nasty chemicals, but you know, pretty nasty for the pine weevil nonetheless. And that's looking at, again, potentially £2 million a year savings in terms of Forest Land Scotland and the wider industry. And the tree seed to sapling process, the company Tree Tape there developed an improved technology from horticultural sector and applied it for the first time to forestry. And effectively what it does is creates a growing environment, a little pouch where the seeds maintained within that environment all the way through the process, rather than it was taken out and manually putting the different elements as it moved from seed germination to moving out in different areas. That's all done in a pouch, in-house, and then that is spooled onto a machine, and that is basically automated as the agriculture vehicles run through the forest, and it automates the plant process. And it's an incredible 2,000% increase in productivity from that project. So both of those are now being procured by Forest and Land Scotland at scale, and both are obviously contributing to the carbon dioxide reduction efforts by providing a more effective carbon sink. The next one's a higher level one, policy challenge, Scottish Government Digital Directorate, really looking at how artificial intelligence can support the climate change agenda, and we ran that through a pre-commercial procurement, small business research initiative. Bit of a fishing exercise, when being honest. It was our first attempt at a higher level challenge, but really successful. A number of really interesting technologies, and hooked them up with public sector partners, potential markets for them. The strongest solution that came through into prototype development demonstration was a company called Space Intelligence, based in Edinburgh, working close with Nature Scotland and developing for the first time actually, a map of Scotland's natural assets. Now, it doesn't seem to some too interesting, but that is really quite a big deal, and particularly when you look at one of the natural assets being our peatland resource. Some folks may know, but we've got one of the most extensive peatland resources in Europe, and that is a potential carbon sink, so a potential carbon emitter if you don't get it right. So for the first time, we're able to, through satellite technology, ground-based sensors, and really clever algorithms, map that peatland resource, but not only that, map its quality and where we can direct peatland restoration investment and track how effective that's been, and then the potential to tap into carbon credits and lever in additional monies into that carbon sink in Scotland. And lastly, we've got a retrofit monitoring project. Retrofit's a big area. It was kind of touched on by Fiona, and I'll touch on it again. But the problem and challenge that the Renfrewshire Council had with us was how did they monitor the internal environment and social housing and retrofit, and multi dimensions to this project. You know, firstly, it's, if you see the image on the left, that if you get a humid, moist environment, you can get damp and real issues with health primarily, but also from if you look at the house as an asset, from an asset management point of view, that's an issue, and if it's left, it can become a really big issue. But also from the carbon aspect, that a lot of most of the retrofit interventions are based on models, and there's a real need for what they call post-occupancy monitoring, and the challenge was to find a solution that could suit that. Now, Renfrewshire came to us. This is a little bit different, and we used a regulated procurement on this one. Renfrewshire had already went through the concept development and were comfortable that the technology was there and it needed that prototype development and demonstration. So we funded that, and we funded it through a regulated procurement services, which is part and parcel of your day-to-day business. And that was successful, and actually our first £1 million contract winner. So IOPT, a Glasgow-based Internet of Things company, secured a £1 million contract, and they are currently rolling out their novel sensor in terms of temperature, humidity, and low-cost communication infrastructure, and again, good data science to pull information from houses and provide a dashboard to Renfrewshire Council. The council themselves have obviously got benefits from being able to understand when folks are maybe needing a wee nudge in terms of just management of their internal environment, if it's getting too humid, to support the health agenda. From a cold economic perspective, from an asset management perspective, each system is projected to potentially save £300 per unit per year. So that's a £300,000 per annum saving, which more than pays for itself in a short period of time. That's before we get scale. But also, as I mentioned before, it's got that ability to from a carbon perspective, to evaluate interventions then direct. And it's also got another benefit in that it can be an early detector of fuel poverty. A lot of times, fuel poverty, first things folks are doing is starting to turn their heating off. So it's not Big Brother, it's designed in a really sensitive way, but it's just giving that early intervention opportunity for the local authority. So yes, the pilot's been successful, and now we're wrapping that approach and the learning into our programmes, which I'm going to touch on, and the degree of focus we've got. But just the sort of key things, if you like, that we've learned, that is the approach works from detailed challenges to abstracts. So it's really flexible in how we could apply it. This will be well known to the procurement professionals, maybe from our innovation perspective. We've been a bit of a learning journey, but you really need to engage the market. Firstly, understand that nobody's out there that actually has the solutions, so there's not a need for innovation, but really understand where innovation is needed, how far away it is from the market. That's relevant to the process you select. A lot of people getting tied up in whether pre-commercial procurement works, whether it's innovation partnerships, but in our humble experience, it's about really understanding how far you've got to go. If it's far away from the market, perhaps pre-commercial procurement. If it's almost there, you can actually see what the product potential looks like, then maybe regulated procurement, including innovation partnerships, is right. But it sounds obvious, but you need to build in business cases to your demonstration. We've had a few early projects where we assumed that was done, but really you make sure that you know what you need to do in terms of making the case for funds if the technology is successful, and build that into your project. And again, you give these clever companies a good, clear, functional specification. By and large, they'll solve it. The trick is, and the real challenge is, understanding how to implement that within your own service, your own processes and cultures and people. That's the tricky part. And again, we started really broad, but we recognise that's good, but we recognise a real opportunity to scale through a degree of focus in the programme and mission-led approach is what I'm going to touch on now. So Scottish Enterprise fairly recently have developed these new national programmes, effectively a bit of prioritisation on key national economic opportunities where we have strengths and where there's significant market opportunity. 3 of them are straight in line with the green economy agenda, and that's where we are focusing our work with the can-do approach that I've just described. So within each of these areas, what we're looking to do is work with public-private sector partners, really understand the sectors in detail, understand the value chains, the routes to market, the potential markets that we are able to provide access to early customers and create these innovation challenges and supply chain activities. So really motor and work with partners to deliver the low carbon agenda, but at the same time maximise the economic benefit where that's appropriate in terms of the cost effectiveness of the solutions. So probably more developed is the zero emissions transport work. We've got a heavy duty vehicle focus on that one, working closely with Transport Scotland and public sector fleets. We've just completed an exercise where we've had a call for innovation in the supply chain, and we are just about to contract 14 projects that are going to develop innovations in that space and work with them over 3 to 5 months to develop and test their concepts. We'll then be looking to scale that into prototype development, demonstration, hooking in with public and private early customers and markets. We've got a lot of work going on decarbonising heat, as you'd imagine. Working very closely with Scottish Government, bringing in work with local authorities, registered social landlords in and around how do we design out the need for heat, and then look at low carbon heating, such as the opportunities around heat pumps, for instance. But that, again, that's all about really understanding the markets, routes to markets, early market opportunities, and being able to feed Scottish companies into that. Less developed, but longer term, very significant is the potential from the hydrogen economy, particularly in Scotland, our ability to use our renewables resource to produce green hydrogen, and then look at where the applications are in transport, heat and power, again with that real focused look and bringing supply chain and innovation support into that. We just finished with just touching on a real belief we've got in terms of how to scale this, and it's we're calling the net zero emission based approach. Now, it's unfortunate this has become a bit of a buzz phrase of late, but it's a really, in our opinion, a really simple concept and really powerful concept. And the Minister touched on it earlier on about that Team Scotland, that coordination, the collaboration. This is really about how can you align your policy, your procurement, your support resources, allowing that common purpose, that common goal, that mission, and that's the nub of it. Sounds dead simple, and it potentially is dead simple to get the right folks together. So the example here we've got is decarbonising heat, low carbon social housing retrofit that we just touched on. Fantastic opportunity here, but just by way of example and focusing on a specific area, we've got the policy, we've got the net zero targets, we've got the new buildings and heating buildings strategy. That works its way into regulation. The stick, if you like, the local authorities, RSLs now have obligations to hit energy efficiency or EPC rates. So that's almost the specification. They need to hit that by a certain time. So there's the market opportunity. We've got procurement frameworks that Scotland Excel are working on in terms of gathering those market opportunities, those routes to market. There's a potential for demand aggregation. I know this is a bit of a contentious point in procurement, but there's a £7 billion investment over the next 5 years that's been estimated to hit those EPCs in the public sector alone. That's before you start to move into the private sector. There's significant capital support to help local authorities and RSLs achieve those investments, and there's significant business support there as well. And we've got a new national programme, so we can beaver away individually in these elements, or we can start to look at how to align them. And within retrofit is a really fantastic opportunity there. There's an approach just now that's been piecemeal. There's focus on the heat pumps, there's focus on insulation, but if you speak to the leading lights, it's about whole systems approach, about a deep retrofit design. It's about looking at the design archetypes, as it's called. So there's only so many types of social housing. You've got your 4 in a block 1950s design, you've got your 1900s, 1910 tenement building. Now, we're faced with each individual local authority and RSLs will be developing their own designs and their own efforts, or an opportunity to do that as a Once for Scotland. So design the solutions, make the design templates, if you like, available to others. Really look at how we can stimulate innovation and supply chain within that exercise, feed them into the Scotland Excel frameworks, look where we can get demand aggregation to get economies of scale where it's appropriate, but not lose sight of the local aspect and particular local installation where it always makes sense, but all driven by that regulation and also that real focus around that common policy objective. So I'll finish there, but just to point out, companies, if you're interested in this type of opportunity, we advertise these demand-driven opportunities through our Open Innovation Marketplace, and the link's there. I would highlight obviously the great work CivTech are doing. They've just closed the CivTech 6, but for companies and public sector, they'll be opening another cohort, and we're really interested in understanding who wants to engage in this agenda, this mission-based agenda around that low carbon area. I talked about retrofit, but can easily lift that and apply it to the transport agenda and working with fleets. So if folks are interested, just drop us a line, and we'd be happy to speak to you. And that's me.
So thank you, Terry. So if you could stop sharing now, please. Thank you. And again, really informative. So we've got some time to open up the panel discussion. So I'd like to invite, we've got some questions that have been posted, but I would like to invite anybody to ask questions, and I would like the speakers, if you could unmute your camera, please, so that we can take any questions. So I'll kick it off, Nikki, with you, if you don't mind, while we are waiting on questions from the floor. And there was an early question about procurement, particularly associated with developing careers. And I guess the question is how we attract, young people into a career in procurement. And at our staff event this morning, we had a presentation from Renfrew High School, and they talked about the sustainability development that they're introducing into, as early on as S1. And they're one of the first schools that have actually created a post for a sustainability teacher, which I found really interesting. But how do we attract young people into a career in procurement, but crucially tying procurement, public procurement, into the wider sustainability agenda?
No, thanks, Hugh. So first of all, we're not just starting out in this. We've had quite a long programme of Procurement People of Tomorrow. So we've done quite a bit of work with young people, asking them what they're looking for in jobs, talking to people in schools. And we've put together a schools pack and also a tertiary education, university and undergraduate course pack for careers advice guidance, people to kind of help get out there, and also to you as procurement practitioners on this call. If you want to go into your local schools or a university or a college, we've got collateral you can use, the pack about what is a career in procurement, and also little games you can play if you can get along to a career event to make it more interactive and interesting. I think procurement is so much higher up the agenda right now because of the pandemic and Brexit that people are starting to really understand, what is a supply chain? We've never had that. So it's a great time to strike while the iron's hot. But, we're already bringing people in. We're connected quite closely with a couple of the universities and colleges that have developed procurement and supply chain courses, including Glasgow, City of Glasgow Council, City of Glasgow Council, City of Glasgow College, and also Glasgow Caledonian, and there's lots of kind of postgrad courses. So I think the thing was, if you're interested in engaging, two things. One, can you create a pipeline of demand in your organisation? None of us have money. So look at what posts you've got at that entry level. Think about how you can shift stuff about and free up one of your vacancy posts to create a pipeline to bring people in, and come and talk to my team. We'll help you. We'll help you with advice and guidance on how to go about that. And the second thing is think about using the collateral we've got and go out and speak to schools and universities.
Thank you, Nikki. So question from Colin Black, and I guess it was probably more directed towards you, Terry, or you, Fiona, and it was about the lack of qualified retrofit contractors and surveyors, especially in rural and island areas, and reference to the funding available is open to abuse for the supply base. And past 2035 was removed, SMEs could do the work. So Terry, first of all, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no slippy shoulder in this, but I will bring Fiona in as the expert in this area. But I think what I would say was it's a huge. This needs to be done, right? So this will be done, and it's a question of how do we maximise the value. So it kind of makes sense, obviously, to be shipping folks in to install. It makes sense to do that locally, and I do appreciate. I'm not immersed in the detail, but I do appreciate there's a skills gap, there's a training gap, there's an investment gap. skills isn't the area that I'm particularly focusing on, so I recognise it's a challenge right now, but it will happen. It needs to happen. The question is, how do we benefit the Scottish economy and have that more inclusive agenda? So it totally makes sense to bring folks in. And some of these areas, the well-worn one is, the gas installation folks, and what they're going to do. They're going to be heat pump. That sounds easy to do, but it's but it is a fact. That industry will go. There's no question of that. It's just a question of when. So there's a need for folks, and folks will pick up on that. So the market opportunities there, it'll happen anyway. And I think the question is, how do we very quickly identify the nature, the scale of those skills challenges and the investment that's required? And sorry, Fiona, but about your more detailed knowledge of the sector on that one.
We had my background, just in terms of context, is in main contracting, and we worked all over the UK, including the Highlands and Islands. So before taking on the kind of role at CSIC, we did deliver rural retrofits and rural new builds, and it's interesting because there's a two-way dynamic to it. It creates problems for the small businesses that have got the appetite for the work and the capability on a local level, but potentially not the scale to get the right points that make prizes in terms of that certification and accredited supplier status. The flip side of that even is the kind of relationship enticements with the main contractors that can support works at scale. So those relationship bridges need to be formed in these areas to make sure that, even if, as a subcontractor position is created, then ultimately, main contractors don't want to go in there at their cost to take on contracts and pay for digs and travel that they don't have to either. But if it's, for me, it comes down to that relationship status, whereby we can't make this change overnight. It will be progressive over time. But in the interim, anything that can be done at a client and procurement level that supports relationships and ensures that demand is not taken away from rural locations, whilst also supporting larger economies of scale, if it's part of a larger framework, for example, is really quite important. And I think that's where, built into your procurement, when we talk about communication methods and meet the contractor days, please don't undervalue how important these kind of efforts are, particularly when it comes to that rural Scotland position, because the flip side of the coin is the main contractors coming into these territories that have an appetite to deliver at scale across a national level are also at the mercy of the very specific skilled contractor in Islay, for example, in stonemasonry or slate and so forth. So there's problems on both sides of the agenda. And every effort you can do not underestimate even the softest of approaches that really just push that relationship opportunity for both parties to make it happen.
So thank you, and I think there are a couple of important points there, and they probably overlap to a degree. The question posed by Finn about intermediaries, and the same response could probably be applicable across. So it's about visibility, it's about communication, it's about relationships. So thank you. Before I come to Chloe about food procurement, Derek made an interesting point, and in my question back to you earlier, Nikki, I talked specifically about getting young people into the profession, but Derek's made a really valid point about how do you create opportunities, but not just for young people, and we've talked about that within Scotland Excel as well. And if you think about it, I made reference to you and I having a similar background, Nikki, that we both came from high volume electronics manufacturing. So we didn't start out within the sphere of public procurement, but we've spent a long time in it now. So not just young people, other opportunities. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I'm on mute there. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, particularly given the economic conditions we're into now. So trying to encourage people in a change of career. We've actually just hired a person in with a complete change of career, and I won't go into too much details because I'll give away who the person is, but being able to kind of show that there is an opportunity for development and, to add impact and value through procurement and retrain. So, absolutely valid, and there's transferable skills there, and to be able to encourage people to start a new career or emerging career where there is a demand, fantastic opportunity to do our bit to support economic recovery. And I think I do think the community benefits clauses are a real good place as well. I think being able to try to promote training and jobs, the right jobs through there, a really good opportunity.
So I think the interesting thing on that, Nikki, is the generation before ours. So our
you make me
parents
feel
now,
old, Hugh.
Well, our parents and our grandparents would have had established on a career path or a trade or a skill, and they would have spent their whole working life performing that skill or trade. You know, that's gradually reduced. You know, and when I started my career, that reskilling would have been 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
I would argue now that reskilling is down now to 2 or 3 years, partly driven by innovation and technology changes. So, yeah, I feel old as well, Nikki, so don't worry. So, Chloe, you asked a question which is a good one around local food procurement and how it differs from rural to urban. And the key question is, does it differ at all, or are there different avenues to facilitate this? So Catherine, one for you, I think.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. So we work across lots of urban and rural local authorities, and crucially, we work to facilitate both very hyper small scale sourcing projects, but also just to increase Scottish sourcing generally. So whereby there might be slightly more political interest amongst elected members in some of the more rural agricultural local authorities, like North or East Ayrshire, where they do have a lot of producers on the doorstep. There's also, I think, an interest in more kind of regional growing in some of our urban authorities. And I think a lot of people appreciate there's an economic benefit to growing the rural Scottish economy generally, as well as there is about those kind of more hyper local projects. So we work with local authorities on varying levels of local, depending on what's available and where the interest is. But it's definitely worth pursuing. But yeah, each case is different, but equally valid.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Just as an aside, Nikki, your response, I think you make a good point about skills development and how you can embed that as part of community benefits. So I agree, we could use public procurement in actual fact to develop those skills as well. Back to renewable and retrofits and installations. So June asked a question about, you know, bad news travelling faster than good news. I think that's certainly the case. And how do we ensure that there are sufficient good quality installers on all the different renewable technologies to meet the challenging targets ahead? So probably one for you, Fiona, but I think that a good reference point to that was when we were embedding the recommendations as part from the construction review that was carried out a few years ago. The challenges around the Edinburgh Schools build quality was just coming to the fore as well. And I think that my observation is that you can't really legislate for that, because ultimately it was that was caused not by specification, but that was caused by poor workmanship at the time. And you know, the whole host of things you could do there, but ultimately the question is about how do you manage quality control and maintain it. So what's your thoughts based on the work that you're doing at the CSIC?
I mean, I think it will come as no surprise that there's no one straight factor that's going to fix that one huge problem. When we talk about quality control, it's process, it's skills, it's procurement, it's client-driven driving costs down, it's supply chain relationships. There are a multitude of cultural factors that come into creating that position and those mistakes that cost lives ultimately. And I can understand why people are asking those questions in relation to new technologies and new skills. And when I've highlighted some of the programmes we're delivering, for example, Passive House and Practice, you know, these are all relatively new approaches to mainstream construction. You know, the learning curve is steep, but the awareness is there and the appetite is there and the government agenda is there. So the incentive is also there from the contractor base to upskill and maintain to secure work. So I think from the point of view of having faith and some sense of the appetite to make this happen, but also the aspiration, I guess, ultimately is creating some sense of, you know, certification that just, you know, not just anyone can deliver this. You have to build your own awareness about what that certification is to make sure you've got the appropriate trade with the appropriate skills and experience to do it in the appropriate manner. And that applies to all trades, new and existing, to be quite honest. This isn't new ground just because the technology is new. This is an age-old problem that we have within a built environment context for skills across the piece. And I guess it's just that responsibility that we have to take throughout our procurement process to make sure qualifications are as they should be, but also trust in that, you know, you are seeking an appropriate delivery and appropriate budget with some sense sense of responsibility that the appropriate supply chain relationships are in place. Sorry, I've just realised how much I've used the word appropriate there in 5 seconds flat, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. There is not one piece of the puzzle that's going to fix the whole problem. There are a multitude of cultural factors that have to shift with the times.
Thank you. Just slightly changing direction, and one that I'm going to bring in colleagues from Scotland Excel specifically within the food area. And Sandy asked a question about how we measure and report on the availability and uptake of sustainable food across the food portfolio, and indeed should there be a requirement to report on this in a broader scale. So I don't know if you want to come in, Leslie, Richard, or you, Laura.
Yeah, I'll come in on this one. Thanks, Hugh. Really good question, Sandy. We currently monitor the country of origins across the core products and all our food frameworks. So we produce reports each year on the amount of food that is sourced within Scotland for each of the local authorities areas. And we've seen over the past kind of 5-6 years, this has jumped from kind of 28% to around 37%. So we are seeing improvements year on year on this. We're also working with Zero Waste Scotland at the moment to develop KPIs around sustainability that we can monitor with all our food suppliers. And again, this is something that we would be able to kind of report out to councils and would be available as part of our food annual reports as well. But yeah, really good question. And there is such a buzz around public sector food just now that I think we can really take advantage of this and really push sustainable foods and really boost the Scottish economy with more local sourcing.
Thank you, Laura, which I think pretty much covers the question in its entirety. Thank you. I don't see any other questions coming through, and we've run over slightly anyway. So if there's nothing else at the minute, I'm going to bring the session to a close. But before doing so, I would like to again thank our speakers. So obviously the Minister, Mr McKee, but also Nikki from Scottish Government, Fiona from CSIC, Terry from Scottish Enterprise, and of course Catherine from the Soil Association. So thank you everyone, I really appreciate it. Thanks once again to our audience for your participation, your active participation. I think it's been a great session and certainly one that's that certainly met our initial objectives, and I'm delighted at what we've been able to cover. So thanks everyone. We will make the session available, as Graham indicated earlier, because it's been recorded. Meanwhile, as Graham's put up on the screen, you can see our social media links as well as the link to our website, and I would encourage you to follow up with us if there's anything that you haven't had the chance to find out a bit more about. But in the interim, thanks very much everyone, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.